Today I'm going to be making this part right here, which requires ejector pins. So I'm going to show you how I use the Travin with ejector pins in semi-automatic mode. Before I get started, about 2 months ago I started to reach out to other YouTube machinists who are doing sticker swaps so that I could help promote my channel by helping to promote other machinists as well as to get promotions from them. For whatever reason, I only heard back from one person of all the people I contacted, who is Mark Pressling. I love his channel. I've been watching his channel for a while, and he does all sorts of things like casting aluminum, a little bit of CNC machining, some manual machining, etc. Right now he's building a kit of a model aircraft engine, which takes me back to my childhood when I had a testers instead of a Cox model aircraft engine and corresponding aircraft. He also sent me this card from the Sunshine Coast. That looks like a very nice place to visit. I don't have a place yet to put up the stickers. That's something I'm going to do pretty soon. And so if any of you have stickers and you want to do exchange, you can contact me by clicking on the About tab above, and then there's a way to click and find out my email address and send me an email. I mentioned in a previous episode that I can use this machine in semi-automatic mode. And semi-automatic mode means that when I pull the mold open with the clamp lever, it will activate the ejector pins and eject the part. So I'll start by showing you more details about the mold, explain why I need ejector pins, why I created the ejector pins the way I did, and then how to set up this machine to use those ejector pins. This is the injection mold that has the ejector pins, and the way it works is there's this plate here, and this plate hits some pins that are fixed on the machine. So as I open the mold, what happens is it hits the pins back here, and then that pushes the ejector pins out. So it's a fairly simple design. It's basically a box. This is pretty standard for ejector molds that have pins. And one of the interesting things is this right here. So this is what comes with the machine, the steel part. And then there's this bar here. And you can see that the bar can move back and forth by quite a bit. This is something I'll be using later to adjust the position this way so that I can center the nozzle over this hole here. And that's important to make sure that I'm properly injecting plastic into here. So you can see that I've got a backing piece here. This is what screws to the main support or the connection to the machine. And then I have these two risers, and then the mold itself is screwed to this. And then in between are the ejector pins. And the ejector pins are pushed into this plate here, and then they're not all the way through this plate and then butting up against this plate. So these two plates are screwed together as well. So what happened with this mold is I originally designed this mold for my AB machine, and then I discovered that I really needed ejector pins because these details here, right here, they're pretty deep, and so the part tends to try to grab onto those parts of the mold, and it's hard to get it out. And so what I ended up doing is putting this back into the milling machine and then drilling out the holes for the ejector pins, which are just pieces of brass. Putting this everything into the mold and putting this in there, and then tapping the rods, the brass rods, into place through here and in here. And so once I had that done, then I put this whole assembly back into the machine, and I milled the ejector pins, which you can see are right where the runners and the gates are. And so I milled them in place so that they conform to the shape of the runner, and they also conform to the shape of the gate. Doing it that way means I'm pushing both on the runner and on the gate, so I get the the maximum force pushing up and pushing the part out of the mold, and as you'll see later, that works really, really well. I won't need these blocks because the mold will take up the entire width. In fact, it needs to be attached to the unmovable side on the right as well as the movable on the left. This is the stop, or I should say, this is the mechanism that pushes against the ejector plate. It's been a while since I've used this mold, so I don't remember exactly how I want to put this in here. So I'm going to put the mold in to get a little bit of an idea. And what I really should do, which I didn't do at this point, is to pull the arm back on the clamp so that the mold is closer to the position it would be in when it's open. I have the fixed side of the mold bolted to this plate, which has a steel bar, and these two screw holes are what is used to hold that part of the mold to the fixed side of the machine. So I'm just inserting the screws in here. And then it takes a little bit of wiggling on the bar to get these screws started. And then I can put the second screw in, do the same thing from the back. It's a little bit fiddly because the back of the machine is closed, so I have to put my hand in from the front. And so it's a good idea to do all of this before heating up the machine. It's time to do the same thing with the movable side of the mold. Put it in place, start putting the screw in, and then it's the same thing that I did in the fixed side, which is to wiggle the plate that you see I'm doing here until I get the holes lined up with the screw. And then I can put the screw in place and then start to tighten the screws down once I have both of them in place. Now, one of the things I didn't realize, and it's pretty obvious looking at the video, is that I had the mold in upside down. The sprue opening is actually on the bottom, and the mold is not the full height, so the full height is 3 inches for this machine. But I only made the molds 2.5 inches high because I originally tried to use my other machine, but then discovered that I really needed to use this machine because I needed the ejector pins, which I added later. And here what I'm doing is I'm trying to close the mold halves. I can see that they don't come together. And so that means I need to loosen the stop mechanism, I'm not sure what this is called, and then move it to the right so that I get just the amount of clamping force that I want. And this is something that I showed in the previous video. So what I do is I start with this just about right, and then I open the clamp a little bit, push it in place, lock it down by tightening the screws, these 2 screws on top. And then also, once I've tightened these 2 screws, there are 2 longer screws that make sure that it doesn't move at all. So I have to tighten these 2 screws, as you see here, just as a stop to make sure that it doesn't move. And then try it out and see how much force it is. What I noticed is that it wasn't enough force, so I need to loosen the screws again that hold it in position. And then I'm going to take these 2 screws and turn them about the same amount to push the clamp stop to the right a little bit more. Try it again, and now it feels just about right. Now it's time to install the other ejector plate stop in the back. In retrospect, this is something I should have done before putting the mold in place because it's pretty hard to get access from the inside, as you can see, because the back is closed. And so I have to kind of work my way in. So it's a really good thing, again, that I don't have the heater turned on because I'd be burning myself at this point. This part is a bit finicky, which is adjusting these 2 stops. One of the things I discovered is that, as you'll see here, the way I have this stop adjusted, it's actually hitting the plate that's holding the mold assembly in place. So I went back and forth quite a few times, adjusting both the front and the back every now and then, until, as you can see here, it started to work so that it would push the pins out when I pulled the mold open and push them back together when I pushed the mold closed. This is when I realized that I had the mold in upside down, so I removed it and put it back in right side up. And here I'm just finishing putting it back in the correct orientation. The way the bar is in the mold allows the entire mold to be moved front and back a little bit to align it underneath the nozzle, which is what I'm doing here. I'm trying to get it exactly aligned. And then once I have it aligned, which I'm doing visually, then I can go ahead and tighten it in place. I honestly don't remember how I had this set up before. It's been quite a few years since I've used this mold. So I eventually decided to take the screw out and to make it as short as possible, which you can see me doing here. And the idea is that the metal part, I'm not sure what to call this, rather than the screw, is what hits the ejector plate. Adjusting the two stops in the front and the back until they don't bind is a lot of back and forth. And so I was just doing multiple iterations, as you can see here, trying to get it so that the front and the back hit the ejector plate at the same time. And it was really fiddly. And I finally got it on this last change. As you can see here, it now moves very smoothly, both ejecting and pushing back, so it's ready to make parts. As I mentioned before, I always like to start with the pressure lower than I know I'm going to need it, so that I don't start by blowing out the mold. And then I want to work my way up in temperature until it's just about right. So it's no surprise that near the beginning I'm getting short shots, and so I need to increase the pressure a little bit. And then I can close it, maybe a little bit more pressure, and then I can close it and try another shot. I'm using an X-Acto knife, as you can see here, to kind of cut the plastic between the mold and the barrel. That way I don't get strings coming out. And you can see it's still not filling, so I went back and forth quite a few more times before I finally got to the point where I had the right pressure. And this is the first time, as you'll see, when I have the pressure set correctly and I get a full part. Now it's sticking to the ejector pins, and the ejector pins are not on the back, but they're on the front. So I have them right there where the gates are, and they tend to stick a little bit, but this keeps it from showing up on the part. Now that mold is pretty close to the limits of this machine. I'm having to get the clamp really tight, and then even then it's right on the verge of trying to blow the mold apart. So I don't have as much margin with the clamping force as I would like. Now, one of the things I'm thinking about doing with this mold is redoing it for the Arberg C4B once I have that up and running, because that has more injection pressure and more clamping force, and it's fully automatic. So assuming I can fix the sticking of the part to the ejector pins, I can redo it so that it's automatic and I don't have to be involved, and it'll just crank out the parts. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please help me grow the channel by subscribing, giving me a thumbs up, commenting below, and if you want to be notified when I have future videos, click on the bell icon next to the subscribe button. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.